podcast where truth moves faster than a Holstein calf. No waiting on some pretty page. We're charting new ground in the digital age. From genomic codes to row-wide facts, we cut through the noise, no holding back. Not your daddy's dairy news tonight. We're sparking debates with every insight. The ring's not where the real fight's at. It's in the data, in the channel chat. From pasture to processor to your morning cup, we're raising the stakes. Try and get ahead of herd. Yeah! Where the future's more than just a word. Ahead of herd. Come on! The Bullvine's calling, let your voice be heard.
Welcome back to the Bullvine podcast, where we cut through dairy industry noise to get you the insights that actually matter for your operation.
And today, we're diving deep into a feature piece about the massive restructuring of the dairy genetics industry. We're talking about a shakeout that has seen family breeding operations lose, up to 90% of their revenue while the corporations just rake it in.
And this isn't just theory or, some market fluctuation. This is about a deep structural shift in where the value is created.
Exactly. It's about where the money went, and more importantly, what you need to do about it right now to keep your entire farm competitive, not just your genetics program.
We're really examining the dramatic, almost overnight collapse of the traditional seed stock model. To set the scene, we were looking at some industry analysis showing that a well-managed seed stock operation, one that was financially sound, a cornerstone of the community.
The kind of operation everyone looked up to.
Right. And it was generating maybe $1.5 million in genetics revenue just a decade ago. Today, that same farm might, if they're lucky, see only $150,000.
And the most frustrating part, the part that just drives these generational breeders crazy.
What's that?
Their cows are demonstrably scientifically better now. They have higher PTA's predicted transmitting abilities and better genomic indices than they ever did when they were making millions.
Wait, so let me get this straight. Better cows, but only a tenth of the revenue. That contradiction is the core problem we have to unpack today.
It is, because for the commercial farmer listening to this right now, the stakes are massive. We are seeing genetic progress accelerate at a speed that's, frankly, unheard of.
Which is phenomenal for short-term milk yield and efficiency, right?
On the surface, yes. But we have to fundamentally ask, are we gaining that efficiency at the expense of long-term cow health and herd flexibility? Because the cost of entry into this fast lane.
And we are going to dive deep into that.
It involves skyrocketing inbreeding levels and contracts that basically force you to give away your farm's intellectual property for pennies on the dollar.
Exactly. We have to identify the two seismic shifts that just slam the door shut on the independent breeder. First, the technology itself.
You're talking about juvenile.
Juvenile IVF, or JOVF, yes. It compressed the generation interval so dramatically. But using it effectively required massive, immediate capital investment.
The kind of capital only the established multinational players could afford to risk.
And second, consolidation. That $170 million price tag that URUS paid for Transova Genetics, that's a landmark figure.
It's a number you have to stop and think about. That money wasn't spent on cows or semen.
No, it was spent on infrastructure and controlling the reproductive bottleneck.
That figure alone tells you everything. The value moved from the cow pasture and the semen tank right into the corporate infrastructure. We need to know what those contracts mean for your data, your elite females, and ultimately your freedom as a producer.
So let's start with the cold, hard reality of that revenue cliff. I read this anecdote about a third-generation Wisconsin Holstein breeder that it really stuck with me.
Okay.
Back in 2012, before genomics really hit its full stride, his genetics operation, selling high-end semen, embryos, top-end females, was netting about $900,000 in genetics income annually.
$900,000. That's a serious capital-intensive business, and it's built on years, decades of pedigree selection showing developing those cow families. That's generational wealth right there.
And that cash flow supported debt, expansion, the whole family farm.
So what happened?
Last year, his genetics income was around $85,000.
Wait, from $900,000 to $85,000?
Yeah, almost a 90% drop. Same dedication, better genetics on paper, and just, a fraction of the income.
Wow. It's hard to even fathom what that kind of drop means for a family farm. That's a college fund gone. That's 20 years of tradition suddenly rendered almost irrelevant from a financial standpoint.
And it really highlights this industry-wide phenomenon we're talking about.
Yeah.
The value hasn't disappeared. It has fundamentally moved. It's been consolidated into the infrastructure required to capitalize on all this rapid progress.
See, that's where my farmer skepticism really kicks in. I get that markets change, but if the cows are scientifically measurably better with higher PTAs and better genomic indices, why is the breeder, the guy who spent generations developing those bloodlines, getting paid less?
It doesn't make intuitive sense.
It doesn't. Not unless the tools required to capitalize on that value have been taken away from him.
And that is precisely what happened, primarily thanks to juvenile IVF, or juvenile. This is the technology that truly changed the game, maybe even more so than just genomics alone.
So genomics gave us the map, but GVet gave the corporations the speedboat.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So break down GVet for us, because most of us know traditional in vitro fertilization, where you get the eggs from a mature cow. GVet sounds like the rocket fuel for this whole corporate acceleration.
It is. Traditional breeding required waiting until an animal reached puberty, 10 to 14 months before you could even start recovery protocols. You were waiting for sexual maturity.
Right, you had to wait for nature to take its course.
With GVet, you can do oocyte recovery from heifer calves as young as 2 or 3 months old.
2 months old?
2 months. You take that calf, you do a genomic test at birth, and you can start multiplying her best genetics before she's even eating adult feed.
So you've just skipped the entire adolescence of the animal. You're bypassing a whole stage of life.
You've essentially skipped 2 years of waiting for the first calf. That single technological advancement compressed the generation interval, the time between generations, from roughly 36 months in the traditional model
3 years.
down to around 12 months.
Holy cow, 3 years to 1 year. That is an exponential change in velocity. That's not just linear growth. It's hard to wrap your head around that kind of acceleration.
And the results, they speak for themselves. The rate of genetic progress has effectively doubled compared to the pre-genomic era. The Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding, the CDCB, has documented this carefully.
So we see the real gains. It's reflected in every subsequent genetic base change.
Undeniably. Commercial farmers are benefiting from this speed. You're getting better traits faster. There's no question about that.
Okay, so that sounds like a massive technological win for the industry overall, but where's the catch? Where's the thing that shut out our Wisconsin breeder and forced him onto that revenue cliff?
The catch is the capital. It's the scale required to make GIVet competitive. Running a competitive GIVet program generally costs $1,500 or more per attempt.
Per attempt?
Per attempt, just for the specialized vets, the hormones, the lab time.
$1,500 is a steep investment if you're just trying it out on a handful of your best calves.
And the success rates are brutal. They're highly variable. Depending on the donor animal's age and the specific protocols, you're often looking at a success rate of only 10 to 30% for transferable embryos.
So you could spend thousands of dollars and get nothing.
Exactly. You need incredibly high throughput, highly specialized veterinarians and lab technicians, and massive capital just to absorb the costs and the variability that comes with those low success rates.
So it's a single independent breeder. They just can't afford to put $1,500 on the line for a 10% chance of getting one good embryo. Not unless they have dozens of animals running through that GIVet pipeline constantly.
It's a numbers game that requires immense scale.
So the technology didn't just speed things up. It built a highly expensive, multi-million-dollar firewall around the elite genetics market. The cost of entry went from having good facilities and knowing your cows to owning a reproductive science lab.
So if the technology built the firewall, the next question has to be, where did all that locked-up value actually go?
Right, where's the money?
That firewall leads directly into where the money migrated. We established that the value didn't just vanish, it migrated. It moved from semen royalties and direct female sales, which was, the 2012 model.
The model that built those independent operations.
Right into corporate control of infrastructure and data. That is the 2025 model.
And when we talk infrastructure, we're talking about the ability to perform GIVet and genomic analysis at an industrial scale, which means you need the labs, the specialized people, and the distribution network to make it all work.
Precisely. To understand the scale of this migration, we have to look at who bought what. The consolidation really started structurally with the formation of URUS back in 2018.
That was the merger of Copon Holding, Genetics' parent company, and Cooperative Resources International, which is GenoX.
And that created an immediate global genetics giant.
That's a big footprint for sure, but those were already genetics companies. The real strategic move, the one that I think changed everything, was buying the service provider.
You're talking about Transova. That $170 million price tag for Transova Genetics, I mean, it still blows my mind.
$170 million?
URUS paid that in upfront cash, plus a potential $10 million earnout. We saw that in the SEC filings from August 2022.
Okay, but why would a company pay $170 million for a service provider? Aren't the cows themselves supposed to be the high-value asset?
They were, but that's 2012 thinking. The $170 million wasn't just for the lab equipment. It was for the bottleneck.
Explain that.
Transova handles an estimated 70% of all elite embryo and IVF work in North America. By acquiring them, URUS essentially guaranteed immediate, high-priority access to the highly specialized infrastructure required to scale GI-Vet.
So they didn't buy the cows, they bought the velocity. This vertical integration means you can no longer pit an independent lab against an AI company because now they're part of the same enterprise.
They own the lab, the genetics, and the distribution pipeline.
That locks out competitors, and it locks out independent breeders from the reproductive capacity they need to process their own animals efficiently.
And while URUS was busy locking down the reproductive infrastructure, ABS Global, which is owned by the UK-based Genus PLC, was playing the same high-stakes game.
Right. They made a move in September 2024.
They did. ABS moved to full ownership of De Novo Genetics. This consolidated complete control over its entire elite female nucleus. They are locking down the mothers of the next generation, the most valuable genetic assets in the world.
And the financial results are just staggering. Genus PLC's recent annual report showed the ABS division's adjusted operating profit was up 53% year over year.
53% in a relatively mature industry segment.
That right there, that number tells you exactly where the value is accruing. It's flowing to these massive entities that control the infrastructure and the data, not to the breeder out in the Midwest.
The operational impact for that independent breeder is undeniable. When a single corporate structure controls the elite females, the GI-Vet infrastructure, the genomic evaluation tools, and the global distribution channel, the traditional breeder's role shifts entirely.
You are no longer the value creator who earns royalties for breeding a breakthrough bull.
You become, effectively, a raw material supplier. You supply the elite female, you get a check, and then you're out of the game for that bloodline forever.
And that check, even if it's a good one, say $100,000, it doesn't come close to compensating for the potential multi-generational royalty stream that the old model offered.
Not even close.
That's the crux of why $1.5 million became $150,000. The asset still has the value, but the ability to leverage that asset for long-term income has been centralized and, well, contracted away.
Let's talk about those checks, because I think this is the segment where we need to inject some intense reality for the person who just got a massive offer for their top heifer.
This is the industry reality check, the contract terms.
If you're approached by one of these corporate programs, you need to read the fine print before you commit your best genetics, because the devil is absolutely in the details.
And these documents are complex. They're written by corporate lawyers.
But the impact on your operation is simple. It's a transfer of control. Let's look at the standard contractual arrangements under programs like ABS Global's Icon Sires or Alta's programs, because they illustrate this corporate control model perfectly.
Okay, so let's start with the bull power. The bread and butter of the old model was breeding a great bull and then earning semen rights and royalties forever. That's why you took the risk in the first place.
That model is essentially defunct for independent producers. Under these new programs, breeders typically sign contracts that irrevocably transfer the rights to collect semen and capture all the revenue to the AI company.
All the revenue.
All of it. You may still technically own the bull, but you do not own the revenue stream. And the contract often dictates what happens to all other male offspring.
So they're often just directed to the beef market or sold directly to the AI company at some preset price.
Exactly. It ensures you cannot use them to compete.
That's a total lockout. So if you breed the next multi-million-dollar sire, you get a single one-time payment, maybe a decent check, sure. But the company gets all the residual profit for the next decade.
It eliminates the financial incentive for the small-scale, high-risk breeding decisions that used to drive innovation in this industry.
And it's even tighter on the elite females, isn't it? The key to the next generation.
It is. This is what we call the option trap. Purchase options often extend for 18 to 24 months, giving the company first right of refusal on your top heifers.
And these aren't open market negotiations.
No, they are at preset prices, frequently in the $40,000 to $100,000 range for the top-ranked animals, based on current genomic index values.
$100,000 sounds great when you're looking at your bank account. It's a hard number to walk away from.
Of course it is. But you have to consider the true opportunity cost. Once that heifer is sold, she enters the corporate nucleus herd.
And the original breeder.
Captures no further value from any subsequent offspring. You developed the line, you invested the years in the feed, you took all the risk, and you get one big payment.
And then you just watch the corporation generate millions from her embryos and her bull calves for the next 10 years. It's the ultimate buyout of future income, and it's often for a fraction of the long-term potential.
And the third piece of this puzzle is just as insidious, maybe even more so because it's intangible.
You're talking about the data rights. I want to spend some time here.
We have to. Genomic testing agreements, almost universally, grant AI companies perpetual royalty-free licenses to use all submitted genetic data.
Perpetual and royalty-free.
Think about what that means. Your genomic data, your hard-earned knowledge about which cows transmit what traits, it gets aggregated across thousands of herds, cross-referenced, and it becomes the proprietary fuel for the AI company's own genetic indices and breeding recommendations.
So they're essentially mining your intellectual property for free.
Wait, so the individual farmer is providing free IP that allows the corporate entity to fine-tune their next generation of bulls, which then decreases the value of the farmer's own independent genetics.
That is supplying the very material that undercuts your future ability to compete. I'm not buying that arrangement at all. Why would any breeder agree to that when the terms are so punitive long-term?
Because without the genomic testing and without access to the absolute elite sires through these centralized programs, they fear being left behind.
But they're afraid of falling off the genetic treadmill.
Exactly. The industry has effectively made participation contingent upon signing away your future rights. You have to understand the long-term cost of this data transfer. It's the fuel for their proprietary indices and is non-negotiable in most of these contracts.
So if you're considering one of these programs, you have to ask yourself, who controls the semen collection rights? What are the specific option prices that are going to lock me in? And how is my data being used specifically?
If you don't know the answer to those questions, you are supplying raw material.
You have to seek out those publicly available terms and conditions, and you have to understand the red flags before you commit. This is a critical business decision, not a handshake deal over the fence.
Now, let's turn to the hidden cost of all this acceleration. We've seen these incredible gains driven by that corporate velocity, but they came at a steep price.
The inbreeding question.
Right. Rapid genetic progress under this kind of concentrated selection intensity is accelerating inbreeding across the major dairy breeds at an alarming rate.
And we've known for decades that inbreeding costs money, it costs fertility, and it costs herd viability. But the pace of it now is what scares me because we're doubling the speed of selection.
It should scare you. Look at the numbers that allDeeper reported just a few months ago. The average inbreeding level for Canadian Holstein heifers born in 2024 reached 9.99%.
So virtually 10% average inbreeding for Holsteins. That is a significant number. And Jerseys aren't far behind at 7.56%.
This isn't just a historical trend. This is a sharp uptick driven by selecting for the same handful of highly ranked, closely related animals over and over.
And we can put a very precise dollar figure on that genetic pressure, can't we?
We can. Industry estimates, including some robust figures from Holstein Association USA, suggest that each percentage point of inbreeding costs approximately $22 to $24 per cow per lactation.
In reduced productivity, fertility, and health.
Wait, let's do that math on the farm. If the average Holstein heifer is at 10% inbreeding, that is $220 to $240 per lactation that you are losing in potential income and increasing in cost.
Just due to the compressed genetics pool.
That quietly offsets a massive amount of the short-term gains that the indices are celebrating.
And it impacts specific critical traits, right? We're not just talking about a slight drop in milk yield.
Not at all. Accelerated inbreeding depression directly hits the low heritability health and reproductive traits, things like retained placentas, metritis incidence, and lower conception rates.
The stuff that drives your vet bills and your culling rates through the roof.
You're essentially trading short-term milk volume for long-term health stability.
That's the perfect phrase for it. Quietly offsetting. And the genetic evaluation bodies, they know this is happening. Dr. Paul Van Rad and the CDCB are already having to adjust their evaluations for it.
They are. The April 2025 genetic base change saw adjustments for expected future inbreeding EFI, which now accounts for roughly 18% of the overall PTA changes in Holsteins.
18%. Let that sink in. Nearly 1/5 of the perceived genetic progress we're all celebrating is already being negated by the cost of inbreeding depression that they are projecting into the future.
It confirms that genetic progress is not free. We're getting gains, sure, but we're paying for them with long-term herd viability and increased management complexity.
For the commercial farmer, this means you can't just blindly trust the index numbers anymore. You have to be highly vigilant in your mating decisions, especially in purebred Holstein operations.
Tools like Lactanet's inbreeding calculator, they're no longer just optional.
They are absolutely necessary to identify concerning combinations before you breed them, or you are simply maximizing your future vet bill.
And this is exactly where crossbreeding, which used to be seen as a way to dilute high-end genetics, is actually becoming an incredibly important financially sound mitigation strategy.
To maintain hybrid vigor and fight that inbreeding pressure.
We're moving from selection being the only priority to diversity becoming a major financial priority simply to keep the cows healthy and fertile.
So the traditional seed stock model is broken for independent breeders, and inbreeding is on the rise for commercial operations. This brings us to the crucial discussion.
Contrarian takes and real-world adaptations. What are farmers doing right now that is actually working to fight back against these trends?
First, we have to acknowledge the mid-size challenge. I keep thinking of that 600-cow operator from Minnesota who said, "We thought doing nothing was the safe move. Turns out the slow leak of equity and value erosion was killing us."
That just encapsulates the struggle perfectly. And USDA data confirms this structural pressure. Over 1,400 dairy operations exited in 2024 alone.
And many of them were caught in that mid-size squeeze. They lack the negotiating scale of the Western dairies, and they lost their lucrative genetics revenue from the Midwest model.
But the operators who adapted, who saw the writing on the wall, found two massive opportunities that the consolidated corporate programs are either ignoring or just not optimizing for.
Okay, let's start with opportunity one.
Beef on dairy optimization.
This has been a true transformation on the ground. I remember back in 2014, crossbred calf production was maybe 50,000 head, and most of that was just accidental.
And the source material shows that number just exploded to 3.22 million in 2024, according to Farm Bureau analysis.
3.2 million, that's not an accident. That's a fundamental shift in national herd strategy.
And the semen sales reflect that intentional shift. Beef semen sales to dairy operations hit 7.9 million units in 2024.
And that's up dramatically from 3.7 million units just a decade ago.
It's no longer a sideline. It's an integrated, proactive herd management strategy designed to create a valuable co-product.
And the economics are just too compelling to ignore. A 2024 Purina survey found that 80% of dairy farmers now receive a premium for their beef on dairy calves.
We're talking revenues of $350 to $700 over the straight dairy calf price.
And if you look at the option houses at major markets like New Holland, Pennsylvania, the USDA verified reports show those beef cross calves selling for $680 up to $1160 per head. That is pure profit optimization.
And for that mid-size 600-cow herd we mentioned, that makes a serious, tangible difference in their cash flow.
A huge difference.
University of Wisconsin research found that herds maintaining 30% or higher pregnancy rates, which is achievable with focused management, can generate over $6,200 in net calf income per month.
Per month, just from an optimized beef on dairy program.
Projecting that out, extension services are documenting operations that are adding $100,000 to $150,000 in additional annual revenue, just from those crossbred calves.
So you're turning your surplus reproduction, the animals you don't need for replacements, into a high-value revenue stream instead of dealing with a low-value dairy bull calf market.
This is leveraging genetic knowledge not to compete with URUS in the elite race, but to optimize your milk check and mitigate risk on your own farm.
Absolutely. Now, opportunity 2 targets the opposite end of the specialization spectrum.
Premium market specialization, specifically grass-fed and organic. This is where the old seed stock mentality can still thrive, but only if they adapt their focus.
I'm always skeptical of niche markets being big enough to really matter. Is this just a coastal trend, or is it bigger than that?
It's not. The global grass-fed milk market hit $63.7 billion in 2024. And the Organic Trade Association reported that organic dairy and egg sales rose 7.7% to $8.5 billion in 2024.
So this isn't a temporary fad. It's a sustained structural market shift toward premium, traceable products.
But why does this matter for genetics? If I have a high-index Holstein, shouldn't she perform well anywhere, regardless of what I'm feeding her?
Not optimally. And that is the critical insight that the specialized breeder needs to understand.
Remember, the corporate programs, the ones pushing the highest index bulls, they optimize primarily for high-producing operations, using concentrate-based feeding systems in confinement environments.
Their goal is volume efficiency. They select for animals that eat a lot of grain and produce a lot of milk. Maximum dry matter intake, maximum peak production.
Right. But grass-fed operations require an entirely different suite of traits. They need grazing efficiency, high forage intake capacity, metabolic stability across seasonal pasture variations,
And structural soundness for walking long distances.
and high component percentages, specifically butterfat and protein, that perform well on grass-only diets. Those traits just do not receive the necessary priority in the mainstream corporate selection indices.
So the specialized breeder can step right into this gap and truly become a value creator again. They can breed for high PTA cows that also perform optimally on forage.
And they are succeeding. A University of Vermont survey showed that U.S. grass-fed organic dairy farmers have expanded by over 400% since 2016. The demand is there.
And the specialized genetics are not being supplied by the corporate nucleus herds because those systems are optimized for a completely different environment.
The pricing difference confirms the value of that specialization. The source material shows a heifer bred specifically for grass-fed systems, with proven grazing genetics and metabolic stability, might command $5,000 to $8,000.
And that's versus $2,500 to $4,000 for a comparable commodity Holstein.
That's a massive margin difference. And embryos see similar jumps, moving at $1,500 to $3,000 instead of $500 to $800.
This is how the independent breeder captures premium value again, by refusing to compete in the commodity space and instead building an irreplaceable specialized niche.
We have to acknowledge, though, that these genetics decisions differ dramatically based on location and scale.
Right, which leads us to our final strategic discussion: future implications and strategic positioning.
That 600-cow Minnesota farm has a vastly different set of strategic choices than a mega dairy out west. And those differences are often dictated by negotiation power and regional economics.
Absolutely. If you look at the Midwest and the Northeast, that's where the traditional seedstock model is struggling the most among those smaller family farms.
But if you look west to Texas, Idaho, California, the herds average well over 2,000 head. Texas, for example, added 50,000 cows to its herd in just 12 months.
50,000 cows.
That accounted for 56% of the entire national herd growth in 2024.
That kind of scale gives those operators direct negotiating power with the AI companies that a small seedstock producer can only dream of. They could afford in-house reproductive programs and purchase high volumes of genetics at a discount. It changes the whole dynamic.
The corporate model is basically tailored for that scale.
And even in California, which is still the national leader, you have regulatory pressures like methane reduction mandates that are creating consolidation pressure that favors the large.
An ERA economics analysis suggested that 20 to 25% of small California dairies could exit just due to these complex, capital-intensive regulations.
So the market dynamics are consolidating differently depending on the region, but the result is the same. The middle is getting violently squeezed.
So knowing that the traditional path is blocked and the middle is unsustainable, what are the proven strategic options for the independent breeder who wants to stay in the game and not just become a raw material supplier?
We identified 4 main strategies that seem to show some promise.
The first is premium market specialization, which we just discussed. Targeting A2A2, organic, or grass-fed. This is high risk, high reward.
And it requires substantial capital investment. We're talking $2 million to $5 million to build that competitive reference population, the genomic testing capability, and most importantly, the marketing and distribution infrastructure to bypass the commodity system.
But the margins are there. And the competition from the major players is, for now, minimal.
The key challenge here is patience. You can't build a truly elite grass-fed line overnight, and that $2 million investment isn't going to show returns in 12 months.
Which brings us to the second option, cooperative models. This draws inspiration from successful European structures, like the Alpine Genetic Evaluation Team, which coordinates breeding across multiple, smaller regional co-ops.
So they share infrastructure, standardized data collection, and perform evaluations independent of the global corporate giants.
But wait, why hasn't that really worked in the U.S.? We have co-ops for milk, why not for genetics?
It requires intense, perhaps impossible, coordination. It requires shared capital for specialized infrastructure, and usually it needs public research support that is largely dried up in North America.
The European co-ops succeeded partly because they had regional governmental backing and a culture of deep collaboration, which is often challenging to replicate here due to competitive individualism and, frankly, antitrust hurdles.
So it's a long uphill battle, but it's a proven structural alternative to corporate control if you can get that regional alignment.
Third, vertical integration. This is simple and highly practical.
Use your elite genetics primarily to build your own production herd rather than selling them off.
Your income shifts significantly. Maybe 80% comes from milk or beef sales and only 20% from surplus genetic sales.
You become your own multiplier. You keep the best females to drive the efficiency of your commercial milk check, using your superior genetic knowledge to lower your replacement cost and increase longevity and productivity per cow.
You insulate yourself from the volatility in the corporate contracts of the external semen sales market. This is highly feasible for the mid-sized farm that needs cash flow stability.
And the fourth strategy, this is for those who realize the structural headwinds are just too strong.
Strategic sale. If you have genuinely top-tier bloodlines, the kind that the corporate acquirers still want because they need diversity for their own nucleus herds, you need to recognize that they are active buyers.
A well-timed sale of your top cow families or your entire seed stock program can capture far more value today than competing independently until that value erodes entirely over the next 5 years.
It requires a hard, honest assessment of your ability to invest that $2 to $5 million into specialization. If you can't make that commitment, a strategic exit is a powerful way to retain generational wealth.
And that brings us to the critical point about the closing window. If your operation is currently generating under $200,000 in genetic revenue, you have a critical 12-month decision window.
For adaptation or strategic exit, the strategic options just narrow as consolidation continues and the corporate systems get tighter.
Waiting is no longer an option. If you don't commit substantial capital to a niche, or plan a robust diversification strategy like beef on dairy, or execute a strategic sale, the value of your bloodlines will continue to erode, leaving you stuck in the middle.
The time for an honest assessment is now, before the value is gone.
All right, a farmer just finished milking and is driving to the feed store. What are the 3 things they need to remember from today's deep dive?
Number 1, audit your contracts and data. This is an immediate action. Do it this week.
The takeaway. The financial value in genetics shifted to corporate hands not because the cows got worse, but because of the fine print in genomic testing and female option contracts. You are giving away your future income streams.
The action. Review every existing and proposed genomic testing or elite female contract. Identify who controls semen collection rights, who has purchase options, and critically, who owns your genomic data.
Understand that current agreements grant AI companies perpetual royalty-free licenses to use your data to fuel their proprietary competitive indices. If you don't know the terms, you are supplying raw material, and that has to stop immediately.
Number 2, treat conception rate as a primary profit driver. This is a medium-term strategy for the next 3 to 6 months.
The takeaway. Beef on dairy programs offer a concrete, accessible path to generate $100,000 or more in additional annual revenue, capitalizing on the explosion of crossbred calf demand, which is up from 50,000 head to over 3 million in just a decade.
The strategy. Focus ruthlessly on optimizing reproductive efficiency. You need to aim for 30% or higher pregnancy rates across your herd because that surplus reproduction is now high-value cash flow.
And investigate specific beef sire selection focus on traits like terminal index and calving ease to turn low-value dairy calves into valuable beef streams that command those high market premiums.
And number 3, commit capital to a niche or plan your exit. This is long-term positioning for the next 1 to 2 years.
The takeaway. The traditional seed stock model is structurally challenged, and the corporate systems are built to lock out independent players by controlling infrastructure and data. The middle ground is dissolving.
The positioning. If your operation generates low genetic revenue, under $200,000, you must make a hard decision within the next 12 months. Either commit substantial capital in the range of $2 to $5 million to truly specialize in a premium market like grass-fed or A2A2, which needs different traits than the commodity market.
Or you assess the viability of vertical integration to become your own multiplier. If neither of those is viable, look at a strategic sale while your bloodlines still command a premium corporate acquisition value. Do not wait for the value to dissipate.
That is a powerful summary of a really dramatic industry shift. For the commercial farmer, understanding these mechanics is the difference between survival and equity erosion.
This has been another deep dive from the Bullvine podcast. For more straight-talking industry analysis, including our expanded contract negotiation guide, head to www.thebullvine.com.
Subscribe wherever you get podcasts. We're out with new episodes every day, and upcoming topics will be a deep dive into how genetics economics play out differently in California's mega dairy environment and the rapidly expanding Texas and Idaho sectors. We'll explore how those large-scale operations negotiate differently, how they manage methane mandates, and what that means for the national genetics market. We'll see you next time.